What? It's winter field day? Uh, okay. Okay. Um, I need to get some coffee. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about field day. Field day is an exercise that tries to capture one of the main purposes of amateur radio, which is the availability of amateur radio to assist communication in times of emergency. And this has been a long standing tradition with amateur radio, going back in its history back to the beginnings over 100 years ago. So, what happens is that every year, it's kind of the big event of the year for ham radio, is that everybody goes out and, one way or another, tries to create a false emergency. That is to say, they go out and they take their radios, battery power, portable antennas, and they go out somewhere in the field and try to deploy in what is not really emergency circumstances, but they try to operate the radio without the comforts of home, basically. So without wall power, without their nice fancy antenna that they have at home, without the comforts of home. So some people take this very seriously, and they'll actually go out in some very difficult circumstances, like on top of a mountain or out somewhere out in the wilderness. Most guys actually will just go and probably participate as a club. Many times this is very much a club activity, and they'll all gather at a particular site. They might set up some tents, and they'll set up antennas, and then they'll attempt to compete. And the idea is to try and contact as many other hams as you can in that time. And you can do so using various modes like voice, Morse code, other digital modes, things like that. It's a lot of fun. It's a chance for a bunch of guys to go out there, play radio out in the middle of nowhere, eat junk food away from the wives, that kind of stuff. It's a lot of fun. So that's what happens in the middle of the summer. I believe it's the last full weekend of June. And somebody thought about this about in the early 2000s and said, hey, the ethos of field day is really sort of emergency communication. And sometimes emergencies don't happen in the comforts of clear weather in a summer day. Sometimes they happen in the middle of the winter during bad situations. So that's when Winter Field Day was kind of inaugurated. And so Winter Field Day is the last full weekend of January. And so now people are going out and setting up their tents or their portable shelters or something like that out in the middle of bad weather. So I'm in Washington. We don't get a lot of snow here, but occasionally we do. Right now it's kind of cloudy and icky, and it's drizzling a little bit. And it's not something that normal people would want to say, hey, I want to go out, set up a little shelter, and play with my technology. To my friends in the Midwest, right now, I happen to know that there had been a weather system that had passed through, dumping just a load of snow. So guys who are out there in field day and trying to actually get outdoors and do field day, it's a difficult circumstance. And so, man, more power to you. During this era of COVID, both normal field day in the summer and winter field day have had accommodations to the situation. So now clubs can't really come together physically to do what they used to do. So now the rules allow us to, each of us separately, to attempt to set up our own field day environments and then combine our scores with the club to try and, compete. My local club, we are attempting to combine our scores. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to set up for Winter Field Day from the comfort of my home. Whatever, okay? Don't judge me. However, what I'm going to do, instead of just using my normal home equipment, which is allowable in field day, you just don't get as many points. And I'm going to set up a radio that I recently purchased from a friend in the club, And I've not used it, high frequency capabilities. I've used it VHF and UHF. I might talk about that later, but I haven't used it yet for the normal kind of classic ham band activity. So I'm going to try and do that today. That's going to be kind of my challenge. The rig is a Yaesu FT818. It is a low power, or what we call QRP rig. Just using a battery, its internal battery, it'll put out a maximum of 5 watts. If you plug an external battery into it, you'll get 6 watts out. So the challenge, of course, will be for me with just a mere 6 watts to attempt to compete with the big boys, which is not going to happen. I'm just actually trying to get out there and see if it'll work. That's actually all I'm trying to accomplish here today. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to clear off my workspace behind me and set up the QRP rig, and maybe we'll talk about how that works a little bit, and then we'll just see if I can actually get on the air and talk to somebody, make a contact or 2 or 3 or 5. Who knows? We'll see how it goes. All right, so that's the context. I've talked real fast, and we'll see what happens here. All right, here we go. So I'm an apartment dweller, and this is my station. You see the major components here and a couple of other goodies. So here we have the transceiver. This is the microphone. Here are the headphones that I use to listen with. Over here, this box is called an automatic tuner, which helps me tune in my radio to the antenna system, which isn't very good because I'm in an apartment and it just is what it is. Here's the power supply. This box here powers the electronics here. And over here is something called Signal Link, which helps me communicate with digital modes. Over here is a clock, tells me the current time. Above, here's a phonetic alphabet, just in case I get stuck during some of our exercises. Here's a little logbook that I keep, kind of a radio diary. Here is the time according to Zulu time, or Greenwich Mean Time. And then over here is a list of all the amateur radio bands. The ones, they have various color codes to kind of tell you what's going on, what can be allowed, and such like that. Above that is a map of the United States giving the U.S. Maidenhead grid square designations, which is helpful in terms of some location activities that we do. Over here is my copy. You can see me in the reflection there. Over there is my copy of the of my license. It's all kind of wonky because I didn't anchor it down with any sticky or anything in the backing there, so it slipped down. Welcome to being a radio amateur, you know? Okay, so then taking a look down, kind of from a higher view. So the wires over here, there's just kind of a little, what looks like a rat's nest of wires. Here, these are the, this is kind of my power distribution block, which I use. The power comes in from the power supply, plugs into one of those things, and then there are several other things that go and power either the radio or the tuner or whatever else I might be having here. And the other part, which is actually kind of important, this is my log book where I record my significant contacts. And then there's a laptop that I use for other radio amateur related stuff like WinLink and logging program and things like that. So otherwise, then we have a mouse for the computer, and then we have the cables from the computer to the radio and the Signal Link and things like that. So there's a simple tour of the station. I have set up the Yaesu FT818 with the LDG Z817 auto tuner. which will helpfully make a good match between the radio and my kind of goofy antenna. In the spirit of a real field day, I would have gotten out in a tent, I would have taken the same rig, and then taken my portable antenna out and stretched that out and all that. So what I'm using is my base antenna. There you go. All right, so this is part of the ethos of ham radio, is to kind of try things out and to experiment. Sometimes things work, sometimes they don't. And when they don't, you hopefully learn from that and try and figure out something that does work, and then you learn more. So that's kind of the thing. So you're seeing what I'm seeing right now. I've properly attached everything together, I think. I'm pretty sure I have. And so now the question is, as my mentor said, we're gonna do the smoke test. We're going to turn it on, and if it smokes, something's definitely wrong. Bad! But if it doesn't smoke, then we'll see what happens, okay? So, let's just see. Here we go. All right. We have a good voltage here at 12.6 volts. We are currently in FM. So now we're going to start moving down the bands just to see. Okay, that's the 108 band. And now we're getting into the broadcast band, FM broadcast. Now we're in the high 6 meter band, which I'm not going to try yet. And now we're in the 10 meter band. This is the 12 meter band. Now we're getting into 15 meters. Now we're getting into 20 meters, which I think we might have a chance of making a good match, but we'll check that out. Let's actually see what happens here, what we can listen to right away. Can hear something there. By the way, the contest has been going now for about an hour and 15 minutes, hour and 20 minutes right now. It started at my local time in Washington at 11 o'clock in the morning. It's now about 20 after noon. All right, so now I'm going to try and find some place that's quiet and see if I can tune up here. Oh, that's interesting. All right, so that's a good example. So what they're doing now is very quickly they're giving their call signs, both the person who's calling and the person who's receiving. They're giving their call signs. They're giving their location and type of transmission. So, for example, they may be running low power like myself, or they're running battery power, or they're running a variety of sort of situations. They're going to exchange this brief data, confirm that they have done that, log their contact with their contact's information, and then move on to the next person. Again, the whole idea is to try and get as many contacts as you possibly can in that period of time. It is a contest after all. So that's what I'm doing. I'm listening to see what happens. Now, before we get too far into it and I get into the action, so to speak, I thought I'd give you a little tour of this little radio and show you kind of what it does and how it's set up. For those of you who don't know, there are other guys who do this do an unboxing, they'll do a review, all that kind of stuff. I'm not that guy. I'm just going to kind of show you what the radio is and the various components that we have in it. So let's do that, and then we'll move on. Okay, so the Yaesu FT818 radio is a low power, like I said, QRP radio, designed to be that way. And so we have two antenna connections. One up here is up front for the VHF, UHF, and there's a little antenna that comes with the unit that kind of extends out like so far, and that's kind of cool. And then in the back, we have gobs and gobs of connections. So here's the HF antenna, that connection that goes to my tuner over here, and then the antenna actually connects over here. What we have here is a ground strap, which I'm actually just kind of dangling out there in the middle of the air, kind of as a counterpoise. It's kind of a weird use of the ground strap, but that's okay. Then we have a data cable that connects between the unit and the radio that communicates. The radio communicates with the tuner, and the tuner connects with the radio. This auto tuner was specifically marketed for this radio and its little brother, or actually I should say its big brother, the FT817. The rest of the connections are kind of fairly clear. We have a power connection. You see it's going over here to this battery. The battery is more than adequate to power up this radio. It's kind of a heavier battery. It's not one of these fancy ones, the lithium phosphate iron deals, but it's portable enough for my needs, and so I'm fine with it. So we have that. Now over here in the front, we then have the connection, over here on the side, the connection for the microphone. No big deal here. The microphone can go up and down and do some interesting things there. And then there's also, if I'm really serious, I won't listen to sound through the speaker. I'll actually have a headphone here, which draws a little bit less power. And again, in kind of battery operation, the less power you can draw, the better. The radio, you can see, has a variety of cool things here. There's some menu buttons around. Here's the main on-off switch. Here, we have a ability to lock the dial so that once I get to a frequency and such, I'm having a conversation, I want to hit that, and so that if I like brush the knob, it won't suddenly throw me off frequency. Here's a volume knob, what's called the audio, right? So we have audio power, and then we have a squelch over here, which is kind of cool. There's a function button over here, which lets you know where you can use alternate uses of your buttons. Here's the, again, menu buttons, some selectors for the menu functions, a clarifier, which allows you to kind of tune in a little bit on a receive frequency. And then you can see that we have what are called these rails here. They're painted in kind of this dark olive green thing that kind of matches the ethos of my buddy who bought this. He actually bought the radio initially, put on the rails, and then he did this. He bought this kind of tactical bag to put all of the station stuff into. He's a veteran, so he kind of got this sort of tactical bag, and it, believe it or not, everything I need to set up a portable station will fit in that bag, which I can carry over my shoulder. The bag has this kind of tactical look to it, which is fine. I kind of, for those preppers out there who are kind of into that sort of thing, I rather would take the gray man approach, and actually not look very tactical, kind of disguise that. But this is the bag that we've got, and it works fine. What I do with this bag is I actually have this in my truck that I just carry with me. This is kind of my portable, fast deployment sort of high frequency rig. So if something horrible happens and I have to get deployed by our emergency services people, I would grab this bag, which also has room for my handheld, and then I would go where they tell me to go and deploy where they tell me to deploy. So that's kind of cool. The whole thing fits in that bag, and that's kind of nice. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to spend some time moving from frequency to frequency and attempting to respond to people who are calling a CQ. CQ means I want to talk to somebody. Notice how the letters CQ is kind of like I'm seeking you. When you're a low power station like this, it's very unlikely that you're going to be able to yourself call CQ and hear somebody respond to you. So usually you call CQ, all the big boys will come in with their 1,500 watt stations. The station who called CQ will acknowledge them, and then they'll start listening for the weaker stations. Well, that's me. So then at that point, that's when I'm going to start calling. I'm going to reply to his CQ, and hopefully he can actually hear me if my antenna is good, if the propagation is good, all that sort of stuff. It's the fun and the magic of using radio. So we're going to try that for a little bit. And I could let the camera run, but I have a feeling we'll see we'll just see how that works. Well, some of the good news is that I have actually made some contacts. I made, let's see here, just a couple on 40 meters, which is kind of about right for conditions and what I've got. Made a contact with a young lady at a club station K7T. Young lady. Every female ham operator is a young lady. It's just the way it is. If one ham talks to another ham about his wife, ham radio is definitely a male-dominated hobby. If one ham radio talks and makes reference to his wife or another ham's wife, it is the XYL, the extra young lady. Anyway, so talked to a gal. She was in Oregon with a club station, and then talked with another guy over in Idaho. Both of them, again, 40-meter contacts. Same thing, I would listen to strong signals that would come to me, and I would be able to hear them clearly or sometimes moderately, and then would try to get them to hear me. But again, I don't have a lot to work with, and so it's either persistence or nothing. And there was a lot of frustration there because, I certainly wanted to turn up the power, but I just don't have any power to turn up. I have had a good test of the equipment. I found that my little automatic tuner here worked really well, surprisingly well, actually. And then you saw me use this big battery initially. Well, now I'm using this little thing here, and it is powering the radio. Now, it's dropped about 0.3 of a volt since I started, but it's working. So all that's good. And it's been fun. I've just really actually about 4 hours into this, kind of did some stuff early on, took a break, have come back. And so that's kind of what we're doing. Still trying to look for those elusive contacts, or as the hams would call it, a QSO, a QSO. So just keep going. We are a little over a week later, and here are kind of some of the results of my winter field. It turned out that I only had those 3 contacts. So what I did next was then format that information into a text file, and then send that text file by email to the event organizers, who will now compile that and combine them with the other entries from our local club. So to summarize the whole experience, it actually went, I thought, rather well. I was able to take this equipment that I had recently purchased. I was able to, and had not yet used it at all, was able to make use of it. It worked very well, actually surpassed my expectations. Had an enjoyable time making those few contacts I was able to make. Again, as I said, it was a little frustrating. Low power means I wasn't able to get out as much as I would have liked to. But that's part of the challenge. That's actually part of the fun of doing that kind of ham activity. So really, at the end of the day, I was happy. I'm smiling. It was a great experience. So had fun. This is part of the thing that we do as radio amateurs, is just get out there, play with the radios, test our technical knowledge and our kind of both the science and the art involved in radio communication, and have a blast doing it. So that's a little bit part of my life, where I kind of get my radio technology stuff, and this is kind of how I apply it. One of many ways. So that's it for this time. Thanks for joining. If you have any interest in learning more about a radio amateur, there are plenty of resources out there on the internet. Again, lots of people who can do this very, very well. So I commend you to go and find them. If you need recommendations, make a comment. Be sure to like, subscribe, whatever, and do all that. But if you do have a question, make a comment. I'd be happy to reply to that. All right. Until next time. See you.